Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 10 o'clock, so I thought I'd start the meeting now, if that's okay. We are missing one or two people. Certainly Councillor Horrell is not here yet. So please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Cabinet Committee Housing on Monday, the 3rd of February 2025 from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall, and the time is 10 o'clock. My name is Councillor Chris Westwood, Chairperson of the Committee and Cabinet Member for Housing. The meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles will be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use the microphones? In the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting this morning, and we will invite you forward when it's time for you to make your contribution. So turning to the agenda. Firstly, apologies. Nancy, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillor White.
Thank you. It is at my discretion that I can invite other councillors to the table for the committee if we do have apologies. I understand Councillor White is unwell and was quite late dropping out. So Councillor Lee, would you like to join the committee for this meeting at the table in Councillor White's place? Thank you very much. I'd also like to recognise that we have Mrs. Mellish, Lynn Mellish, sitting at the table. Lynn is a member of the TACT board, and Lynn will participate in the items relevant to the work being done by the TACT board when we get there. Item number 2, disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? That's none. Thirdly, request from councillors to speak. Councillor Lee, we've had a discussion. You were registered to speak on items 7 to 12 inclusive, and I think the agreement is, and the conversation is, that you will use the position at the table to table your questions and air your views during the debate, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Public participation. Mr. Perkins, you were registered to speak. I understand that you no longer wish to speak, and as discussed, and you and I will meet after this meeting to discuss the issues that you wanted to talk about, which would be great. So just contact me for that. Mrs. Mellish, you wanted to speak on items 9, 10 and 11, and you clearly, I will turn to you for items 9, 10 and 11 when we get there. And you can speak from the chair there. Mr. Tate wants to speak on items 7, 9 and 12. And Mr. Tate, I'll call you up at the once I've done the introduction for the relevant items at that point. Item number 5, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 5th of November 2024. Fellow cabinet members, can I ask if the minutes are agreed as a correct record? Thank you. Item number 6, Chair's announcements. I have 2 announcements to make today. So if I can just get my laptop in the right place, excuse me. Okay, so I have 2 announcements to make today. Firstly, the refurbishment of 59 Colbrook Street. Cabinet agreed funding on the 21st of November 2023 to refurbish and break back into use 59 Colbrook Street for conversion to shared accommodation to provide 6 units of temporary accommodation for guests on various government resettlement schemes. I'm pleased to announce that the refurbishment of 59 Colbrook Street has now been completed, and the property has been handed over to the housing team, who are now preparing the property for occupation. So well done all, thank you. The council's resettlement team will continue to support the occupants of the property during their residence there. Once the property is not needed for households on the resettlement scheme, it can be used for general temporary accommodation within the council's stock. The priority was to bring the main building back into use, but we will now turn attention to the stable block at the rear of 59 Colebrook Street. We should be able to bring that back into use as self-contained accommodation within the original agreed budget. I'd like to thank Hampshire County Council for their support in funding this refurbishment, Cardo, who carried out the refurbishment work, and the Winchester City Council officers for their work in completing this refurbishment. It's pleasing to see a tired and neglected building brought back into use. So well done to everybody involved in that, and hopefully that'll be a great accommodation for our guests and when they move in there in the not too distant future. My second announcement is on grants to support homelessness. I'm pleased to announce that the council has received just over £1 million at grant funding since the last Cabinet Housing meeting held in November 2024. The funding has been secured through the tireless efforts of the Strategic Housing team, and they're rightly proud of securing this much needed funding. I'd like to add my thanks for their work on this. So thank you, Mrs. Thorburn and team. The funding received supports the following important areas. Firstly, homeless prevention grant of £780,000 for the period 2025-26. Secondly, Rough Sleeper Initiative grant of £96,000 for the period 2025-26. In addition, we've received the following one-off grants: £37,000 to fund our work in supporting victims of domestic abuse in the period 2025-2026, £83,000 from Hampshire County Council for the provision of homelessness support services in the Winchester area for the period 1st of May 2025 to the 31st of March 2026. Thank you, Simon. Let's get back to where I was. This money will fund a complex needs navigator post and a housing first worker post to help those impacted by the closure of Westview. And finally, a £42,000 winter pressures grant for the period 2024-2025 to further help those in need this winter. We're grateful for the financial support of both Hampshire County Council and the government to help address homelessness in the Winchester district. Despite our top quartile performance in homeless prevention, we're seeing an increased number of households in bed and breakfast accommodation, reflecting increased demands on our services. As such, there will be consideration of enhancing the homeless budget as part of the 2025-2026 budget setting at Cabinet when it meets later this month on the 12th of February. So that's Chair's announcements. The next item on the agenda is the New Homes Programme. And I have Mr. Tate wishing to speak on that item. My update is very short. This is a regular update, and I'll hand over to Mrs. Egan at the right points to take us through the presentation. But Mr. Tate, if you'd like to join us at the table, and I think you know.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. I follow the New Homes Development Programme quite carefully, and reading through the current update, it feels to me that the very essence of the programme has changed. When the council bought itself out of the government's notional housing debt back in 2012, it freed up the council to start building new council houses again. The programme was always intended to increase the overall number of affordable homes built in the district, rather than what now appears to be happening, that is the council simply buying up finished homes from developers as part of their Section 106 legal affordable housing liabilities. The 146 homes on Kings Barton were always going to be affordable. The only change is that the council will own them rather than a registered provider. I feel this is a very disappointing development, and whilst I understand why it is happening, Surely it is absurd that it costs the council around £5,500 a square metre for a new property if it builds it itself, when a developer, it will cost about 3,000. That's an 80% more expensive. And those are the costs from Southbrook Cottages. And my understanding, unfortunately, Sparsholt, the figures are looking similar there. So I do wonder whether those will be the last programmes the council commissions itself. I've questioned why the council's own new homes are so expensive, and simply to say it's the council's procurement route doesn't seem to really explain the position to me. It would be great to know how many new homes in the council's programme will come through purchasing Section 106 units, and how many new homes will be delivered. And again, in essence, the programme was always to increase the overall number of affordable houses in the district, not simply to shift the ownership from registered providers, accepting all the difficulties of their funding, but to shift it to Winchester City Council. That's no net gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Okay, some of that will be picked up by Mrs. Egan's presentation on the new homes update when we get there. But my comments on this to start with, the buying and not building, as you talk about. Now, this was clearly articulated at the planning, the budget setting process for 2024-25, which happened nearly a year ago. And as you're well aware, the cost of development, construction costs have gone up 64% in the last 3 years. And this has made building homes very challenging for many people, including builders and us. And secondly, the cost of finance for mortgages for homeowners has rapidly increased and is showing no signs of coming down at the moment. And equally, the cost of loans for the council to in terms of building new homes is also increased significantly, with the public sector borrowing rate, public loan board rate being high at the moment. So the strategy, as laid out last year, is absolutely to continue providing new council homes where we can. There's multiple strands to it. One of them is to buy Section 106 homes when they become available at the right price, in the right place where we have demand. And we still have a waiting list on Hampshire Home Choice of 1,600 people awaiting homes, and it would be remiss of us to stop providing new council homes simply because the build costs in this country are so high and the cost of money is so high. So the decision was taken to buy, not build, at this point in time, and that decision will be reviewed every time we review the business plan. And it is fully our intention to go back to building when the economic circumstances allow us to do so, and that will be reflected in our plan going forwards. In terms of the other two questions as to why the development costs are higher for us than the major developers, and the number of new homes that we expect to build or buy through Section 106, I'll leave to Mrs. Egan to pick up in her presentation, if that's okay. So thank you for your questions today. Mrs. Egan.
Just give me a sec while I share my screen. Okay, hopefully, yeah, we can see that. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I've been asked to present a brief update on the new homes delivery programme and what's been happening since our last meeting at Housing Cavcom in November. I am going to keep it quite brief just because I'm conscious the agenda is quite full. So I don't perhaps have quite the detail on some of the programme elements this time, but obviously very happy to take questions such as responding, to Mr. Tate, etc. So my first slide, I did decide to share this one again. This follows on from my last presentation in November. There have been a few tweaks to the programme since then, but it's broadly very similar, showing our new build and acquisition profile and demonstrating that we can deliver 1,000 new homes by 2032. So I won't dwell too long on that. There's not too much really to update since last time. The map is back. I have made a few tweaks. Thank you for picking up where we made some errors last time. Hopefully it's a little clearer to read. Obviously, I'm always happy to provide the detail behind that if anyone needs it, but that shows our completed schemes on site, and also includes the RP forecast. What we have done differently this time, as requested, was produce a demand or need map. This is a heat map. The darker blue shows higher demand and the lighter blue shows lower demand across the district. Recognise there's lots of information here. I'm sure everyone will want to process that in their own time. Obviously happy to take questions, and thanks to my colleagues for the data on that that's helped us to produce it. It's a really useful graphical way of us showing the areas that we really need to focus on going forward for affordable housing delivery. As we've said, this will be through building our own schemes through our pipeline and also acquiring units ourselves from Section 106 opportunities and additionality opportunities as well. And we also work really closely with registered providers to ensure that the units that they're developing are appropriate for meeting need in those areas. And then a final slide from me. So I did say it would be a bit brief. This is a slide looking at our progress and actions over the last quarter since we last met. The first one is that I'm obviously pleased to report that the 6 units at Hobbs View in Micheldever reached practical completion and have been fully occupied. So that's a fantastic result, I think, for our team and for the council. It was quite a challenging project, but really pleased that we've delivered these to a Passive House Plus standard. We're still finalising the elements of the build contract and the financials, but once that's completed, we'll be bringing a lessons learned report through Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet for discussion so that we can learn from that scheme. And we're also now working on the business cases for 2 new schemes, which I'm sure will be familiar to everyone in the room. We're going to bring the outline business case for the Corner House in Winchester and the final business case for Woodman Close in Sparsholt. Again, we're just currently finalising those figures and hope to bring those to Cabinet very soon. In terms of our acquisitions of Section 106 units, we're continue our legal negotiations for acquiring the affordable units at Hazley Road in Twyford and Kings Barton in Winchester, and those discussions are progressing well. We're hoping that the Twyford legal documents will be ready to sign in the next couple of weeks, Kings Barton taking slightly longer due to the size of the transaction. And then alongside those live opportunities, we're also regularly engaging with small, medium and volume house builders, registered providers, to try and identify any new opportunities that might be coming forward. And then my final point is on our strategy. We're looking to update our housing development strategy over the next couple of months. And a key section of that will be a focus on rural strategy, making sure that we really drill down into that and update that within that document. So I'm conscious that's been quite a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully it provides an overview of what we've been up to, and obviously happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Egan, can I just ask if you are able just to address Mr. Tate's couple of points, which was why is our development cost different to a major developer's square metre cost, and your view on how many homes may be built versus Section 106, which I know is difficult because of the financial position, and we don't know when that's going to unravel.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the difference in build costs, obviously everything's very site specific, but there's a huge difference between acquiring 146 units at Kings Barton and trying to deliver 5 or 6 units on a challenging site, perhaps in a rural location. So the build costs really do just reflect the difference between a volume house builder's ability to purchase and ability to have sway with contractors. Often, they're building obviously hundreds of units in one go, and that provides economies of scale. Often our smaller sites are very challenging in terms of, say, access, contractor compounds. So there's lots of abnormal but standard abnormal costs for smaller sites that just make that square metre build costs go up really very significantly, and we do recognise that. We do obviously quite rightly have to procure, but I wouldn't say that hugely impacts the costs. I think it is just very expensive to deliver small schemes on small sites. So that's where that difference in build costs comes from. In terms of the split between Section 106 acquisitions and building ourselves, apologies, I haven't put that detail into this presentation. It was shared in the November Housing Cabinet presentation. There was a pie chart in that presentation. I haven't included that just for time reasons. Obviously very happy to bring that back next time. From memory, it was approximately 65% acquisition versus 35% build was the approximate split from memory. But as I say, I could bring that to the next cabinet as a standard item.
Okay, thank you, Pazzi. And clearly, as the economic position changes and as the government's position on how they're going to fund their 1.5 million homes changes, then that will change our position on how we address the demand across our district and may alter that pie chart in terms of the proportions going forwards. Okay, thank you for that. So turn to my councillor colleagues. Are there any questions on here? So Councillor Lee, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is an error which has been corrected, but I was comparing the November distribution map of Winchester City Council houses and registered provider schemes. We seem to have gone backwards in the southern parishes: Swanmore 36 to 35, Wickham 39 to 36, Bishop's Waltham 37 to 34. So can I ask if there's a reason for that drop, or was that just an error?
There were quite a lot of corrections from the November one to now. I would say that the one now is absolutely correct. We've triple checked it. So,
okay, so that discounts my question as to why and what the remediation actions might be. Thank you. And my next question, if I may, very quickly, is on the first preference location demand. Obviously, I see this denotes that there's no qualifying connections to the Pacific areas. But can you explain what this demand is based on? Is it related to work, lifestyle, or something else? I'm not sure how that's arrived. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Yes, so the housing need or stroke demand is based on the criteria set out in the Hampshire Home Choice Allocations Framework. So they have to have been resident in the Winchester district for 6 out of the 12 months or 3 out of the 5 years, have a family member in the form of an adult sibling, mother or father or grandparent or step or half for the last 5 years, have to have worked here for 12 months or more, or have a proven support need. That's to qualify for Hampshire Home Choice. And then there's another layer of local connection criteria for the villages. So preference is what people where people would like to live, and then the local connection is where they actually do have an assessed local connection.
Okay, so simple as that.
Is that okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Horrell.
Good morning, Chair, and apologies for my late arrival. Traffic in Winchester is bad today. A couple of points of clarification for Caroline, and if you want to take these away and come back to me, that's fine. I still don't recognise 22 in Sparshall on the map from 14 to 28. I don't know quite where they are. A question for Karen, please, on the preference location. Could we annotate this for when this is? Because obviously needs change literally month on month. So when was this taken? I'm not sure when the Hampshire Home Choice data was taken. And is this just the number who have identified that location as a local connection? that you were explaining to Councillor Lee, or is it someone who has a need and has that as a sort of a second element of their preference? So that would be just helpful to annotate and understand. Chair, I'd like to ask if those of us who've lived the Southbrook cottages from the identification of the site to the opening, whether we could contribute in any way to that learning report, because I think we do, as local councillors, feel that we've lived that journey, and we might have some thoughts about what residents have said to us, if that's appropriate. And finally, you mentioned the rural strategy, and I noticed in the development plan and on a later paper, we have changed tact. We were going to have an enabler, we're not doing that. You're saying there's a paper coming. One of the commitments when we changed the new homes approach was that we would continue to look at rural. I remember having the conversation with Mr. Hendy. So understanding when that paper is coming and the fact how that fits with everything else is really important, because I think some of us feel that the rural aspect of our new build is important, although potentially lower numbers still important. So just understanding when and how that is coming forward, and where the input is coming, because I think you'll have many councillors in rural areas who would have some contributions they'd like to make to that too. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Start with Mrs. Egan.
So the very first question in terms of number 22, that's Woodman Close in Sparsholt on the map. Is that the question you're asking,
So is
Councillor Horrell?
okay. So that is just the scheme number, not the number of houses.
Absolutely, they're all scheme numbers. Sorry, that's a very, very good point. These
Thank
are
you. Then
all
it would be helpful just to annotate that accordingly.
Yeah, no problem. Again,
Thank
for
you.
brevity, we've not included that, but very happy
Yeah,
to. So
if you could just.
I'll I can include that list
Thank
next
you.
time. Sorry, thank you. Shall I?
Southbrook Cottages and the
Southbrook
consultation.
Report, yeah, so we're drafting that at the moment. I think it's absolutely incredibly valuable to have input from everybody who's been involved in that project. Obviously, being relatively new, I particularly like that. So if that's considered appropriate, then I'd be very happy to share that in its draft stage. But we need to, as officers, just be comfortable with the figures that are in there first, if that's okay, and then we'll be looking to share that. Yeah.
Okay, and just to add my £6 to that, I think it's important that we speak to the ward councillors and possibly even the parish councillors in that area to get the input to that. And clearly that was a scheme that was driven locally upwards, and it's only right that we take input in the wash up from those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's really helpful, because the numbers are the numbers, but actually it's about that whole journey that we've all taken locally. That would be helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that support. Thank you.
Please continue.
So the final one, I think, for me, in terms of that rural strategy. So I'd like to update the housing development strategy. And to me, a rural strategy would sit alongside that. It's crucial to me that they're linked. So I plan to do that over the next couple of months. And again, I think it would be worth, obviously that would be with Councillor Westwood, but it would be brilliant to get input on that as well, if that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Thorburn, I think it was a question on criteria and eligibility.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for your question. The need data was run in October 2024, and it's based on applicants' selected first preference of where they would like to reside. So it's quite high level. We haven't drilled down into second and third preferences. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I also visited a resident at Hobbs View last week. Absolutely tremendous, particularly the storage options. Very excited about those. There were a few niggles which I passed to Mr. Hendy, which I will pass on to you as well. I also have an interest in the rural housing strategy, particularly with the sustainability of exception sites. I am very keen on having mixed communities in the villages, but we do have to recognise the challenges of that for the residents and work out how we address those. but I'm very relaxed. I've also been working with rural housing enablers from Action Hampshire. I don't have a problem with our not having our own enablers. I found them very effective, and there is a virtue to them being outside the council, which I found extremely useful. But
Can I just remind you in question?
it's about being involved in the rural policy, Chairman. Thank you. I think we all have something to offer there. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just pick up on that? What is the reason for not having our own rural housing enabler? Is there a particular reason? Are there disadvantages or advantages? I'm not clear. Thank you.
We're finding at the moment it's more effective to engage with organisations such as Action Hampshire, who are totally dedicated to doing, engagement with rural communities, parishes, etc. So to support an enabler within my team obviously has a financial cost. So we find it's more effective for our officers that we have to engage with, say, Action Hampshire and with our rural focused RPs. So we have a lot of meetings with RPs that focus on rural as well. So we kind of have that network. At the moment, that is, we consider that to be the more efficient way.
I thought there was something like 2.2 million as part of the DEFRA push to set up the rural councils and the RHE scheme. So why wouldn't we be able to tap into that? That's my understanding, reading the Hampshire Rural Community Council set up. Maybe wrong on that, but that's my understanding.
Okay, unless you have an answer for that, is it something we want to take away and come back with, Councillor Lee? Okay, thank you. I've seen no more questions, so I'll move on to debate on this paper. Is there any debate? Councillor Lee.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the Passive House Plus approach I thought was a great gold-plated way to go forward, but presumably that comes at a heavy cost. And picking up on some of the comments earlier about that playing into reduction of and build out because of those higher costs. Is this something we're going to continue to look at, or is it now just seen to be too prohibitively expensive in terms of what we want to do?
In terms of the schemes that we take forward from here, they need to be financially viable, and schemes such as the one at Sparsholt are expensive, as you know, but the benefits out the far end are great. So are we going to continue with these? I would suggest that we need to step back a little bit in the current financial environment, and that proposing a scheme such as the passive houses at Sparsholt is probably not financially viable at this point in time. Now, as economy changes, as technology changes, as there are more passive house type buildings being built and the economies of scale kick in, then that may come back into our position. But at the moment, I can't see us taking a scheme forward such as Sparsholt at this point in time. Mrs. Egan, do you concur with that?
Yes, and I think it would be useful to go through the lessons learned from Southbrook Cottages so we can understand where the costs were and where the issues were, the challenges. But I would agree with that, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. And I think you'll know that there's a great support for our new homes programme and the desire to continue to add to stock, and indeed the support within the HRA to fund that. So I think that is something that we should all be absolutely proud of. I do think the balance of where we build and how we build is an interesting question that we're challenging. And I wonder whether this committee ought to be asking for a more detailed understanding of the point that Mr. Tate has made this morning, which is that huge differential between our costs, because we're building 5 or 10, and house builders, and maybe Councillor Cutler's team could help a little understanding that value equation for us, so that we manage expectations, because if it is such a fundamental difference, then maybe that is something that we all have to really get used to, which is very different from perhaps where we were 5-6 years ago on this programme. Chair, the other element I think is to be commended is lessons learned. What have we learned on the way? And so I completely support your Hobbs view review. Let's understand where we started on that, what the aspiration was and how we've ended up, and the hurdles we've had to overcome in that, so that we can all learn. I think that's really beneficial. And also to understand the need and the location of new homes, given we've got such a substantial district, a very large physical area, and also linking where people have connections family-wise, but also work-wise, clearly, in terms of their new homes. So I hope we continue to be granular in our understanding of this, because I think it helps us to be a really good house provider and home provider and community building right across the district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more debate? Yep, Councillor Cutler.
And I think the debate so far has demonstrated how dynamic that cost situation is, and one of the things that wasn't mentioned, along with Mr. Tate's comments about the difference in build costs, or it's not so much the difference in build costs as what we can buy them for. So although the big builders obviously have the economies of scale and they are cheaper, part of the dynamics of the situation at the moment is that because the registered providers aren't coming in early on the affordable housing, and they need to sell and have the cash flow, we can gain an even greater discount. So that disparity between our own build costs and the cost at which we can buy them is even greater. So I think, I mean, what that demonstrates is that we just, you know, it's a rapidly changing situation. If the other registered providers have more funding through government and can move more quickly, then that difference probably won't be quite so great, and then we'll be in a slightly different position. And we need to be monitoring that at all times. And the cost of money, as Councillor Westwood has pointed out, is the other element of it, where we can borrow slightly cheaper, but it's still expensive, and so putting all those things together just prove the point that we need to be continually reviewing the position we're in. And so I think it's important that, you know, make the points about priorities for rural areas and where the need are, but then that has to be factored into the broader dynamic about the costs. So I support the fact that we need to be continually reviewing it.
Final, all right, I see two. I'll take Councillor Lee, Councillor Power, and then I'll sum up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder whether the mindset and the model which we're grappling with here is not quite right. Costs and skills, as we know, is in short supply. You know, there are difficulties there. So, you know, Balfour Beatty might be talking about flying factories, bringing the opportunity to create and supply closer to where the need is. Modern methods of construction will reduce costs, because you don't have, you know, the scaffolding and all the other aspects which are part and parcel of traditional design and build. So my question really is, are we really pushing the envelope to try and deliver more housing in a different way? And maybe as a district, we need to think about joining up with other districts. Again, there could be economy of scales there. I know this is not easy, but is there any thoughts going on in pushing in that direction? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. And finally, Councillor Power.
Chairman, thank you. Another factor we need to take into account, I think, that tenants would rather be our tenants than registered housing provider tenants. I believe we also have a better tenancy sustainment in council properties, and that really does affect the life chances of these families. And really the other effects, other costs that we have as a council, and indeed the unitaries will have. We need to reflect that and celebrate that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Just to sum up, I mean, there's, I'd like to thank, first of all, Mrs. Egan and her team for the continual work they're doing into bringing new council homes into this district in very difficult circumstances in terms of the economy, the skills, and so on, in terms of trying to get those houses onto our list. And we take a very pragmatic approach to this. We have demand, we need to meet that demand, and a way of meeting that demand is to buy Section 106 homes at this point in time. I say again that this is a business plan that's reviewed constantly. We have constant meetings on this, regular meetings, and clearly the HRA plan is rebuilt on an annual basis to reflect these circumstances at the time and the strategy we should take forwards. As and when the economy and the time is right, then we will pivot towards building and away from so much buying. But that is not the time at the moment. In terms of Councillor Power's point, I mean, absolutely concur. I mean, I knock on enough doors of registered providers' homes, and I'm very clear that people would like to live in council homes. And so we still have a very big job to do. My final point is that we are taking a longer term view over our planning. I've asked very clearly for Mrs. Egan and her team to demonstrate to me how we achieve the 1,000 homes target that we want over the 10-year period, where that's going to come from, how it aligns to the demand that we're seeing, hence the maps you're seeing in the analysis you're seeing at the moment. I want certainty of outcome on delivering those homes. The method by which we deliver them, I'll say again, will vary on a year-by-year basis as the levers change. You know, as the government decides how it's going to deliver its 1.5 million new homes in its 5-year period, that will have a big impact on how we deliver our homes across this district as well. And I take Mr. Tate's point and everybody else's point that we need to be a net provider of new homes, but at this point in time, that is difficult for us to achieve, but we can drive forwards our council home programme through this other method, and we are supporting builders in a time of difficulty for many of them with cash flow and so on, that enables them to move to future phases as well. So there's many benefits in us doing this. So at that point, I'll close that. Thank you again, Ms. Egan. Move on to item number 8, which is the retrofit programme update. And again, this is a regular update. We have no public questions on this. So Mrs. Burbidge, can I hand over to you for a short update on the retrofit programme, please?
Thank you. Good morning. As much as the new homes was kind of just an update, as Councillor Westwood said, it's just to run through where we are.
I think we just need to move your microphone a little bit closer to you, if we can, so it's a bit louder. Thank you.
There's been, sorry, stop, perfect, right. There's been a slight change to some of the slides. It's ever so slight. I'll call them out as we go. It's only just a sequence. So I'll run through where we are with regards to the programme and updates, then look at the Warm Homes programme, which was launched by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, and then just see where we are with the progress in terms of photos. We've seen the slide on many occasions. I think really the introduction to the slide is that retrofit is a moving feast. We understand that the targets we put in right at the beginning of the financial year does need to be altered as we go through, because we do come across hurdles. And I think myself and my team are always of the opinion that we need to get this right. We need to make sure that we go slow to go fast. and its quality and our tenants' well-being really at the heart of this. So where things are not going quite right, let's hold, review, and deliver differently. So the numbers highlighted on the screen with the light blue are really the ones that would be affected. But we have come a long way in working with contractors and feel that the next financial year will be a lot speedier in our delivery because we've learned so much from what we've already delivered. So if this is just a snapshot where we are, we've obviously had a number of pilots over the 23, 24 and 25. And it really, yes, we've moved a bit, but obviously not as fast as we'd like to. And so it's a pause, it's where are we and how do we then take this chunk of 29% EPC-D properties and move them to a C? And this is where we're looking really at the DESNZ, Department of Energy Security and Net Zero funding to help us make that jump. The program is was launched in October, renamed from SHDF to SHF. It's now Warm Homes, and it's Wave 3. The main aims of this program was really to improve as many homes, to improve fuel poverty through energy efficient measures, and to bring properties up to an EPC-C by 2030. The second aim is really to deliver progress towards net zero 2050 and the carbon budgets by installing energy performance upgrades and low carbon heating. So these were the main two goals of the SHF Wave 3. And fundamentally what has changed from the SHDF Wave 2.1 and Wave 1 was that it was very much based on fabric first. So you could not apply for low carbon heating such as air source heat pumps or renewables such as solar PVs unless you'd taken fabric and proved that you'd done everything you could from a fabric point of view. This wave is very different in that it's saying all cards on the table. If it's within the standard assessment procedure calculation, any improvements within the SAP, so standard assessment procedures, the SAP calculations that we do to improve properties, then you can apply for it. So it's not just fabric first. So what does that give us, or what opportunities does that give us? How do we again move these 29% properties to a C? We know that from delivering over 500 properties over the last 2 years, that the fabric alone is not getting us to the C, as we see from the percentages. So the next step is to have a mix, is to say fabric's important, and we never really want to change that from the point that where it's feasible and efficient, let's continue to do the fabric and take that opportunity to upgrade our properties and make them good. But let's also use technology, because it's come along that far, to ensure we improve and reach our EPC targets. So within this wave, we put 672 properties. There are a mix of traditional on gas, non-traditional on gas, traditional on electric, and non-traditional on electric. And let's move these 672 properties to an EPC-C. DESNZ have suggested that within this wave, there will be more funding, if not a second wave. If this delivery works, as we hope it will do, then we will no doubt apply for more funding to complete the rest of our properties within that D and below bracket. So once this is delivered, what does that look like for our pie diagrams or charts? We're sitting with 29% in 2025, and it moves them to 16% in 2028. But that's, as I say, not to say that we don't have other programs in the background, and also that we wouldn't apply for more funding if it were to come through. And then finally, just where we are, we know that the Swedish cottages have had a couple of hiccups. We're definitely firm in believing that we can complete them within the year of 2025, and we continue to roll up our fabric works to our traditional properties. Thank you.
Thank you. I can ask if we have any questions. Councillor Powell.
Thank you. As you know, ventilation is my bugbear. Have we taken precautions to make sure these ventilation systems cannot be turned off, or indeed the undercut doors blocked? I do have a second question about rural properties. They are subject to power cuts, and if we do see the need to install batteries, what will be the lifetime of providing heating for those properties in the event of a power outage? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Power. Ventilation's also my best friend. It's something I often talk about to everybody. I agree that the turning off of the ventilation units has been an issue. We really try and engage with a lot of our tenants, residents on the importance of that ventilation. So in a lot of our tenant forums that we've held, as well as through our own media and pamphlets, we explain why the ventilation is necessary. We could take steps to making it difficult for those to be turned off, but it becomes a bit difficult when it comes to maintenance of those units. So we've had to really draw a line, or follow the line as to what's the right balance. But my hope is that now that we've got a tenant liaison officer in post, that really we could begin engaging in educating our tenants. And I think really therein lies the answer about blocking of door undercuts, and about, because inevitably we've got over 5,000 properties, we're never really going to be able to manage how people live. But as we all know, going towards the next phase of putting energy improvements in our properties, it is about changing the expectations of how we live. And that is a real key in terms of delivery. In terms of the delivering of electric to where we have rural properties, we have quite a few properties, we understand, who are on solid fuel, and therefore it will change for them. We are looking obviously at battery. This is very new for us. We're still investigating, but I will definitely take your comment on board, because it has been raised with us already, and see how we can best support those tenants. I do appreciate that there's a balance, but also I think the move to air source heat pumps and solar panels will make a much better outcome for them in the long run.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say, it's really good news, music to my ears, to hear that we're not wedded just to fabric first, and it might be fabric second, third, fourth. This is the Octopus Energy model, which makes a lot of sense. My question really is related to the forthcoming, or the current government consultation about the new SAP. It's the home energy model, which I'm sure we're going to be commenting on. But can I ask, are we thinking about this now? Because fabric performance, heating systems, smart readiness and energy costs are all wrapped up in that, and it's going to deliver a better outcome for residents, cost running of properties and so on. So I wonder if you could just explain to me what our expectations are, and whether we're getting ahead of the game, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think what's important is that, as much as DESNZ is saying that their goals are not necessarily just to achieve that EPCC, that it is about decreasing fuel poverty and making for long-lasting, better run homes, is ultimately the same target our team have in being able to ensure that whatever we deliver is going to make a long-lasting change. So I'm always been of the opinion that whether it was SAP or EPCs, or the next model that is due to come in, which will take several years to actually develop, is that ultimately we need to make sure that we have least regrets. So whatever we deliver needs to make sense logically and financially, and to ensure our tenants are put in a better place rather than ticking boxes. And all of those calculations are very much tick box based. You get points based on X. And if we follow that, we're going to come short. So it's very much a case of ensuring that what we put in makes a sense from a practical, financial and tenant benefit point of view. So yes, it is something that I myself know about. It is something I've looked into, but it will change that, the scene of how we calculate improvements will change, but we need to make sure that what we're doing makes logical sense at the end of the day for me.
Please do.
The new local plan is going through its process at the moment. There are two key new policies in there: CN8, which is all about embodied energy, and the other one I think is CN3. This is the LETI low carbon net zero standard. So my question is, will we start to think about capturing the embodied carbon and embodied energy of what we're doing in retrofits, in products and insulation and so on, as we will be doing for new developments. It just seems madness not to be doing that for retrofit as well as new developments, and that fits with our carbon neutrality action plan. And similarly, it makes sense to consider the low energy aspects perhaps more robustly, given the new CN3 policy, which is coming through the system. Thank you.
I agree. I think at some point it's going to become mandatory that embodied carbon is going to have to be documented in whichever construction industry you're in, and it is something we will have to start accounting for. At the moment, I can say, because the industry is moving towards a point of capturing the embodied carbon, unless you go to a full SAP calculation, which is not something that retrofit does at the moment, unless it's necessary, it's difficult to actually compare apples for apples. So I myself has sat down with data sheets and documentation to ensure that I can try and compare embodied carbon. It's almost impossible because you can't find the figure that's comparable. And again, it then goes back to the manufacturers and how they're capturing that. So I think as the industry moves, it will become something that's easier to be done. I'm cautious that now that whatever I put on paper will not necessarily be accurate, because what I'm getting from one supplier is very different to the next. Does that answer your question?
I just hope that we'll be thinking about it.
Yeah.
It will be possible to capture some of this information. That information is available. We're doing that for new developments. We should be doing it for retrofit where we can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if I could just add my comments onto that, Councillor Lee. I mean, this is a debate, embedded carbon, that we've had at a council level. It's not just housing, and it's a much bigger picture, looking at the embodied carbon across everything in this district. So we are a small cog in a very big wheel here, and we clearly, things are developing, but we don't have the answer yet. Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, presenter, and for persevering and all the effort that you and your team are putting in, because obviously it's moving and you have a lot to deal with and huge expectations. So thank you for that. A couple of questions. First, the proof of principle really on Fabric First and then the technical solution, because obviously as we learn how to do that, there will perhaps be ebbing and flowing. So how are we along that journey already, if we're going to be able to implement the technical piece and understand the impact of that? And also, you mentioned, dear to my heart, Swedish cottages, and you said some learning. Again, in our spirit of learning, so that we can do better next time. What have we learnt there that we would do differently next time? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for the compliments. They're much appreciated. May I ask you please to clarify what you mean by Fabric First to technical? Are you meaning Fabric First to a more low carbon heating solution?
So you've said, obviously we set out on Fabric First as our sort of strategy. Now, obviously, we're going to be allowed to add other elements, certainly in the next wave and the financials, but actually just the proof of principle of how you can marry those two in a property and get the net benefit that you're looking for.
Thank you for the clarity. So whilst we had several pilots, as you know, from 23 to 25, and they mostly were all based on Fabric First, we had 5 properties that we took the opportunity of actually exploring quite a wide variety of measures, including different heating systems. There was air source heat pump, which was trialed. There was infrared, which was trialed, storage heaters, which were trialed. And really, these properties were insulated to the nth degree to ensure that we really got the best outcome from the heating. We've evaluated these properties. Obviously, our continuous tenant engagement and monitoring systems within these properties let us know how they're performing. And really, the best combination was the air source heat pump and the solar PVs, both in terms of running costs, as well as living comfortably within the home, and obviously adjusting how people live. We took a lot of learning from that. We also as you may remember, we did apply for wave 2.1. We did deliver on that wave, but not completely because we were struggling with numbers. One of the significant numbers we were struggling with is because the fabric wasn't achieving that EPCC. So what we did was during that delivery, we went back to consultants and really did a quite thorough investigation of how we move these properties to a C. And it became very clear that we needed a mix between the fabric and the renewables and the air source heat pumps. And within those calculations, it demonstrates what tenants are expected to then pay, or the benefits really from a cost point of view. It also allows us, having delivered, to understand what the cost output is versus what the benefits are on all levels, local authority as well as those living within the properties. So that's just your first question. With regards to the Swedish cottages, I'm beginning to love them as well. There's a lot of learning in there, and there's a lot of learning that we are already starting to take on board, especially with the delivery of the Wave 3. One is to ensure that we assess contractors on quality rather than just economy. The reason for that is we all know retrofit is a niche industry. It's young. There's not a lot of capacity within the industry. And if we make it about cost first, we're going to struggle to find the people that can deliver correctly. I think that's the fundamental one. And once that is done correctly, there's support for occupants while the work is being carried out. The way in which the work is delivered, the quality in which the work is delivered is resolved. We've also gone quite a long way in terms of developing our own technical documentation so that we're far more certain about how we deliver and what we're delivering before we engage with tenants.
Thank you. I'll take final question from Councillor Clear, then we'll move on to debate.
Thank you, Chair. I realise that you're working very hard to deliver, so well done. But could I just ask you, because it's quite an upheaval for tenants, do they cooperate well with you? And usually everything's done well, so they don't moan and groan, if you like, because, you know, it is quite an upheaval at times.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I think in most instances where occupants are already struggling with a certain item, they welcome our interventions. In other instances, it's just about raising awareness. I have a phenomenal team who work really closely with tenants where they are struggling with the disruptions in their home, and we have gone to provide support where needed. Contractors are also sensitive, so we're very much of a consensus that where occupants need more support, that we are all on board in providing the occupant the additional support. In most cases, I think people are glad to have us there, and the disruption specifically probably moving forward will be a little bit more, but I think the benefit outweighs the disruption in most cases, and once people understand that, they fully support the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to debate. Is there any debate? Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I should have asked actually, but I just wanted clarification on the Clerk of Works and the retrofit resident liaison officer, which seems to me maybe a key enabler for some of the things we've been talking about. So could I ask, is it possible to see the terms of reference? I'm quite curious to see what that's all about. And I think we get into the paper in one of the next agenda items. You're talking about a climate change, greener homes, tenant engagement, carbon literacy program. So I guess that's part of this nexus of ensuring that's fed with the appropriate ingredients. So I look forward to hearing about that, because I think that's really important. Behaviour is actually critical. Taking Councillor Powell's point about ventilation, it's a nonsense to move into a gold-plated passive house, and then the first thing happens is the windows are opened or whatever. This is just counterproductive. So I look forward to hearing what those two elements are, and when are they working now, and what are the terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. In the early stages of the retrofit programme, tenant resistance was a factor. I think that there are signs that that resistance is being overcome. I would point out that councillors are very happy to help in overcoming that resistance wherever possible. Anecdotal evidence is invaluable when doing so, and please use us as you can. Thank you.
Okay, any further debate, or can I sum up? I'll sum up. Okay, first of all, thank you, Mrs. Burbidge, for all your work and all your team's work, which is making a difference now. And I'm so pleased the way it's going and your energy and everything that your team's doing to drive this forwards. When I first took this role, we had started, but we'd barely achieved much. But now we are achieving so much more, and I'm grateful for all that. I'll pick up on the points around communication. I've always said that communication and engagement with the tenants is critical to this, and as we move forwards and putting technologies such as PVs, batteries into homes, then it becomes even more critical, because there's no use putting that technology in there if it's not used properly. So if you've got empty batteries from November to early March or so on, when the sun's not shining, you know, what tariff are these people on? So you need to look at holistically at the homes in the terms of the fabric, the technologies in there, and how you get best out of it, what energy tariffs you're on, when you use your washing machines, all the rest of it, to make the best of the work we're putting in there. So that is a massive piece of the work, and that in terms of the liaison officer, there's plenty of work for that person to do when they're on board with us. So thank you very much for your presentation, and I think we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the housing strategy 23-28, a progress and update. I would like to, first of all, invite, we've got 2 public speakers here, effectively. I have Mrs. Mellish and Mr. Tate. So, Mrs. Mellish, would you like an opportunity to just pose your questions in this area? Or if you have any. On the housing strategy, yes, do you want to turn your microphone on?
Sorry. On item 11.
Can we just deal with item 9 at this point? Sorry to confuse you. Item 9, which is the housing strategy. We'll come to item 11 later.
Oh, sorry, no, this is item 9.
Item 9, sorry.
Just on the report, 11.11 on the report, the better managed homes. When I counted the bullet points, there were 12. So clearly a lot of ongoing work, and I can see challenging times ahead. So I just wanted to say I'm grateful to everyone that's stepping up with the new regulations and in the way that they are doing what they're doing to comply with the changes. My hope is that in order to remain compliant with the new and updated policies are going to be required, that the consumer standard groups and the involved tenants will be consulted in a timely manner and at all stages. Draft form when amendments are made before the end of final reports, so that tenants have the opportunity, if they so wish, to comment and ask questions at all stages, because if they're brought in at the beginning, things change and they don't then always get another opportunity. And it has sometimes felt that maybe the tenants are consulted towards the end and are given the opportunity to ask questions, but it's actually already done. So I just would like to be sure that tenants are going to be consulted at every stage.
Thank you. If you want to turn your microphone off now, thank you. Right. Yeah, I absolutely concur that consultation with tenants on anything that we're doing that affects the delivery of our housing service is of vital importance, and that's a core remit of the TACT board, of which you're a member, and holding the council to account for their actions, and it is a core remit of one of the CSG measures as well. in terms of communication. So that is absolutely taken on board. Thank you. Mr. Tate, would you like to join us?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet again. Of the 4 key objectives stated in the strategy, I've only got time just to pick up on one, and it won't perhaps surprise you that it's about new housing. And so I've got a question, and it says, in what way is the council enabling other housing providers to maximise the amount of new affordable housing delivered across the district if the council is picking up on its Section 106 affordable homes? And just to put a little bit of illustration, Sparsholt, Alfred Homes got permission to build 10 properties, and they're advertising them 700,000 to 2 million. Their build costs at £3,500 to build 10 are going to be significantly less than the council's programme in Woodman Close for 5 houses. So it's not about large scale sites. This is Alfred Homes building 10, not 100. So the issue of build costs is still critical. Councillor Cutler made mention of the Section 106. I have been involved with the Winchester Housing Trust, set up effectively by the council in 1987 when the council couldn't build its own council houses. My involvement with them goes back 25 years now. And Winchester Housing Trust bought 3 units down in North Whiteley, and we purchased those at 30% of the market value. So that just gives an illustration for why Mrs. Egan is looking at Section 106, but it doesn't change my fundamental question as to why Alfred Homes, who are the preeminent developer in Winchester and sell their properties at a premium, can build a house for £3,500 when the council would build a house for £5,500. It raises all sorts of questions. I would also say that the Winchester Housing Trust is a small-scale developer of housing, and tactfully, I'm not sure that I've seen much engagement with the council. I appreciate Councillor Westwood was a director, but is no longer. The council's given up its role as a director, which I thought was a valuable role, and it gave a sense of what the trials and tribulations of smaller developers. But so I do come back to my single point is, what is the council doing to help registered providers in the district deliver more affordable housing? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Just to pick up on the Winchester Housing Trust, yes, I was a non-exec director of that, but Councillor Batho is currently on that board, but not as a non-exec director. I understand that, but just to make it clear that there is representation from Winchester Council on the board. Thank you. Mr. Egan, are you able to field the Alfred Homes question? I suspect I can forecast your answer, but please.
Absolutely, and thank you for those points. They're really useful. Just to say, on the Winchester Housing Trust, I met them last week, so we do continue to engage with them, just to reassure. In terms of the Alfred Homes scheme at Sparsholt, that's really useful information in terms of build cost. I would need to look more in more detail at the specification of the units. I recognise there'll be very high specification units in terms of their appeal to the market, but I don't know what environmental standards they'll be hitting there. So that's something I would look into. And obviously we're doing the deal at Twyford with Alfred Homes, so we have really good contacts there. So I'll absolutely pick that up and ask them how they're delivering that. So thank you for that market intelligence.
Thank you, Mr. Egan. So moving on, the housing strategy paper provides a high-level vision for the framework for achieving housing aspirations, meeting diverse needs of residents. It's focused on ensuring households can live in energy-efficient, safe homes, sustainable neighbourhoods, all in line with national housing policy, the council plan and the local plan. It was agreed at Cabinet Committee Housing in November 2023 that an update be provided to this committee regarding the progress on the 4 objectives in the plan. And this report highlights the progress made towards achieving these objectives since the strategy's adaptation and identifies the challenges encountered during this period, discusses the emerging challenges that have surfaced since November 2023. And it was agreed that we would receive an annual update and a new action plan outlining next steps to continue to achieve the 4 housing objectives, which is the purpose of the paper that's been delivered today. So first of all, can I ask if Mrs. Thorburn would like to add anything to what I just said in terms of framing the paper?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So, councillors, do I have any questions? Councillor Power.
I'm afraid I have quite a few, Chairman. The first one is regarding Section 106 acquisitions. Are they in the right place and are they the right shape in the terms of size to meet our established and predicted housing need? I know that's a movable feast. Likewise, those houses bought that previously sold under the right to buy. A third question may be more difficult. I note that there are at least 3-bedroom houses on the open market at substantially less than our build costs, ignoring the costs of the land to buy them. However, there will be immediate costs of bringing them into use as council houses, but what are the challenges regarding ongoing maintenance with a very much distributed housing base, and is that insuperable, and would that prevent or even considering that open market housing? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Egan, thank you.
Yeah, if I can take the first question, if that's okay, on Section 106 acquisitions, thank you. So the size and location of the Section 106 units will obviously be determined by the Section 106 agreement, which goes through our planning system. We have a housing enabling officer in my team who works closely with planners to make sure that we're building right size and right place, engaging with developers through the planning process. So yes, and we also wouldn't acquire unless it was the right size and in the right place. They're key to us.
Thank you. In terms of
regarding acquisitions, Chairman.
I was turning to that. Okay. In terms of houses sold under right to buy, then it is very clear that we will look at former right to buy houses that come onto the market. And I know you've been reading the draft HRA business plan for 25-26, where we articulate that quite clearly. And there are recommendations in terms of providing more freedom for the officers to make decisions quickly on those properties without referring to this committee or for me to me. So in terms of right to buy, we're very firmly focused on getting value for that, and a sum of money has been allocated or will be allocated should the plan be agreed by Cabinet and full council for 25-26 to actually purchase those properties. Houses on the open market as well is an area that we are interested in. So if we have again within the HRA business plan for 25-26 clearly outlined that we are looking to buy properties such as former HMOs in Statmore area as an example, and again there's delegated authority to Mr. Hendy and his team, and Mr. Hendy and Mrs. Keys as the finance officer to progress purchase of those properties. In terms of ongoing maintenance of those, then if we're looking at right to buy properties, we're going to have other properties in the near neighbourhood, and houses on the open market we will only buy if they are in the right place where demand is required, if they're of the right size, and if they're financially viable to do so, to bring back into use. There's a lot of factors there. Mr. Hendy, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. I think that you've already mentioned the point that we assess the viability of any scheme, either acquisition or new build, in terms of what net present value will be achieved by progressing with a particular scheme. and clearly we'll be looking for the most economic way to bring units back into use. Chair, you already made mention at the top of the meeting today, we are facing increasing demand from homeless households in temporary accommodation at the moment, and therefore we need to make sure we make the best use of the Housing Revenue Account funds to bring forward affordable housing wherever we can, either through Section 106 acquisitions, building ourselves, or buying existing properties, just to identify what is the most economic way of doing that. As part of that net present value calculation, we include assumptions in terms of the management and maintenance of units. So there will be provisions in that financial calculation to make sure that's covered.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Lee. I'll say Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just come back to the rural strategy, and it was good to hear that you're taking that forward. So thank you. I'm looking at the district map of Winchester and registered provider schemes in the district, and there's a clear vacuum on the eastern side of the district. So my first question is that a South Downs National Park factor? So it'd be good to understand that. And I welcome the opportunity for councillors, parish councillors, and so on to input into that rural strategy. One of the other concerns I have is that I was looking at this as out of curiosity about a Hampshire rural transport strategy, which seems to have died. Now, if we are to be shifting from vehicle-centric planning to focus on people and places, this really does beg the question about sustainable living in rural areas. So really, I guess, Chair, it's a question for you and Cabinet to beat the drum at the door of Hampshire to find out where is that. And I think the other issue is that time is of the essence. If you've got potentially devolution and the local government reorganisation coming down the line, and as we know, this is going to stretch the lines of between the decision makers and the decision takers, from strategic combined authorities and unitaries to parishes. And so it's, in my mind, this needs to be done pretty quickly. So my other question is, when will we see this rural strategy? Will it be this year, before we know maybe Devo and these other local government organisations can kick in, possibly end of this year, beginning of next year? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Egan, are you able to answer the questions around the distribution of the houses in South Downs National Park?
Yes, thank you for the question. You know, one of the reasons that we want, one of the reasons that we wanted to bring that demand map up was because we wanted to be clear that obviously we want to deliver, or want RPs to deliver, where there is also a need. And if you look at the two maps together, you'll hopefully see that, although they don't match perfectly by any means, but the eastern side of the district is obviously more rural within the national park. So I think that is the main reason why not much is coming forward there in comparison to some of the other more urban areas. I mean, quite recently we have been looking at some more rural sites in the South Downs that we own. We continue to review all of our land ownerships to see how we can help with housing delivery in those areas. But I think the land availability is one of the key issues in that eastern part of the district. In terms of our rural strategy, we've made a start in drafting it. We're very much hoping that will be coming forward in, you know, the next sort of quarter, 2 quarters or so. But we'll be looking to engage as we discussed previously.
I'll just take the other questions first, if I may. So my comment on that as well, we are all aware that devolution is coming down the line. That cannot deflect us from running this service. And, you know, we're absolutely focused on running this service until there is clarity on devolution. And so that's what we will continue to do. So as Ms Egan has said, we will be working on that rural strategy and bringing it forwards as quickly as we need to and can do to deliver that. We will be mindful and listening to what's going on the devolution debate as well. So we will not be holding it up for that, but we will take that into account as and when there is clarity on what's going on. In terms of transport and rural transport across Hampshire, I think we're all mindful that transport, bus transport, train transport, any other form of non-car transport is sadly lacking across many places. You know, one of my hopes for devolution going forwards is that we start getting a joined up plan for between housing, work, transport across the whatever district it may be. So I'm mindful of that. Clearly, it's not within my remit to do anything about it other than lobby Hampshire County Council currently, which you also have the opportunity to do as you have a member in that council chamber as well.
So obviously the great concern is that obviously the youth are leaving these rural settlements, and the ageing demographic means that obviously they cannot downsize, and otherwise they have to move. So I hope the rural strategy will capture some of that granular information forensically to use in an evidence base to drive some of the decision making for the future. Thank you.
And thank you for that input. And I know Mrs. Egan has noted that down. Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask about, well, 11.11, better neighbourhoods in particular, please. Community engagement officers, and they do a very good job. I'm not disputing that, but do we know how often they do come out to attend rural wars? Because we've had quite a few antisocial behaviour problems, and they have been noted and reported by us as ward councillors, but we never seem to have a follow-up and or be informed. So can I ask, can we be informed, as you know, to make us aware, and when we do report, please may we know the outcome, because residents do ask us what happened when so-and-so came out about so-and-so, and I find it difficult because at times I can't answer that because we don't get a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clear. Mrs. Hobbs, are you able to? Okay, Ms. Anderson, thank you.
Thank you. I'm working with the team to make sure that we are better engaged with our councillors and members so that we do keep updated on progress on particular areas of concern. Being quite new into the team, just working to embed that with my colleagues, but completely appreciate your feedback about how we can improve that for you, and I will take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. I'm intrigued, and I think we, all the councillors have stories of how registered providers are not always well respected in the district, and their attention to looking after the properties and the communities they have. I note that we had intended to have an open forum with RPs, and there was a reluctance to that, and now there is engagement on a one-to-one basis. But where do we see the knitting of the RPs together? I don't see any reporting here particularly of that, and those who perhaps have a stronger interest in the Winchester district than others regarding their properties and their approach to their tenants here. I also note that we're going to have a homeless forum this quarter, just questioning when that's going to be, and our councillors going to be invited to that. And also, I remember attending a private landlord forum at the end of 23, and I know that was an interesting discussion. But again, and I know one of our experienced officers has recently retired in that area. You know, what is our footprint going to be in terms of the private sector? Because clearly, with some of the issues our residents are suffering, they are perhaps not as well supported in the private sector as maybe obviously with our own officers, our own council tenants. So just to understand what those various threads are with other organisations in the district who are providers of homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Thorburn, I believe you can help us with all of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. I'll just answer them in turn if that's okay. So starting with the registered providers, twofold really, because we work with them both operationally and strategically. So we work with them operationally on a day-to-day basis, but strategically we have had 2 registered provider forums last year, organised by Alex Burns, and they were really good, and we hope to carry that again forward this year. And from that, these strategic meetings, we concentrated, for example, on a little bit on the regulator to see how we could support each other, because I think it was agreed that between the providers and Winchester City Council, we all had strengths and weaknesses. So what were we doing well, and what could other registered providers learn from that, and what are registered providers doing well, and what could we take away from that? So a couple of the topics discussed, for example, were development, tenant satisfaction measures, management moves, the domestic abuse accreditation. So that is happening. Regards to the homelessness forum, yes, we're due to do our prevention, homelessness and rough sleepers strategy 2025-2030 this year, and the homelessness forum will be part of the consultation for that. And actually Charlotte and I will be working together to set the dates for that tomorrow, so they hopefully will go out to everybody very shortly, because I think for those that attended in November or October last year, it was a really worthwhile event, so we absolutely want to carry that forward. Thank you. And regarding private landlords, I'm pleased to say that we have recruited a replacement for Kevin Reid, who retired last year, and John Corrie will be starting with us on the 17th of February. And one of his priorities will be working with our private landlord tenancy sustainment officer to pull that project forward. He has an inordinate amount of experience of doing that from the borough that he's come from. So that's one of the things, especially with the I'm going to get it the wrong way around now, but the Renters' Rights Bill coming in and hopefully being enacted in the summer, it's more important than ever that we get that forward. Sorry, that forum up and running again. Does that cover all the areas, Councillor Horrell?
Chair, can I just quick supplementary on the RPs though, on the development plan, it said that they were reluctant to attend the forums and we were going one-to-one, which is slightly different from what you've said. So the words on the paper don't quite link with what's happening, unless I'm misunderstanding the description on page 42 of the report.
I'll start, Councillor Horrell, and then I'll hand over to Caroline. So the RPs had a presentation from Simon Maggs, and it was agreed from that RP forum that the best way forward was to work on a one-to-one basis. So I'll pass the baton. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a slight difference, and we probably need to just make that clear in the report perhaps, but I think Karen's talking more in terms of, you know, operationally with RPs, those RP forums are ongoing, but from my side of things, when we're talking about commercial opportunities, they only wanted to engage on a one-to-one basis, and we've been finding that really effective. So I think the two things are happening at the same time, and we perhaps just haven't made that quite clear in the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cutler.
Yes, I hope I'm not being too pedantic here, but the council plan outcome relates to previous council plan rather than the new one, whereas we're looking forward here for reviewing. So I wonder if you have reviewed the housing strategy in the context of the new council plan. I realise there's not huge changes, but the paper only refers to previous council plan.
Thank you. That's a helpful reminder. Yeah, we'll take that away and review that. Thank you.
Okay, take one more question, then we need to move on in the interest of time. We have a long agenda, so Councillor Lee.
Yeah, a very quick one, thank you. I'm just looking back at the comments I made earlier about the Greener Homes Tenant Engagement Training Programme. This seems to be largely focused on carbon literacy and so on. Is that going to be more wider than that? One of the things that does concern me is that all of our properties will have washing machines, for example. And I should have perhaps mentioned when Prashanta was here, the fitting of what I call fibre or plastic filters to stop the stuff getting into the aquatic environment is really quite important. I'm not going to give you the facts and figures about what this means in terms of tons or grams, but this is really quite a serious issue. There are some low-cost measures that can be undertaken, and I wonder where, as part of the retrofit program, maybe this is where it focuses. But my real question is, can this be more than just carbon, because there are other aspects, as we've heard, so we can make it more rounded in helping residents and our local districts. Thank you.
In terms of your specific question there about plastic and washing machines, that's kind of outside of our remit because we don't fit washing machines into the properties, so it's a bit difficult for us to actually engage on that.
They could be fitted to the actual drains to stop getting into waste.
Okay. Officers, is there any comment on that, Mrs. Hobbs?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we heard earlier from Ms Burbridge's presentation, there's work ongoing with the retrofit programme and looking at kind of the changes with funding. So the tenant engagement sort of strategy communication plan is being reviewed in light of that, and also with the recently appointed resident liaison officer who is in post now for retrofit. So we recognise there's lots of moving parts and that's why it's kind of going to go on to next year's plan. And I think it's just what are the quick wins that we can get out and communicate effectively, which we already do, looking at it in a bit more detail as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horry, you were looking at me as though you wanted to ask one more question, and I will allow that. Please go.
Thank you. Chair, in 1110, a really important part of our work is the Disabled Facilities Grant and the fact that we allow people the opportunity to stay in their own homes. Could you just expand, and you're saying in the report about actually revising that, making some changes to that. Can you help us to understand what your thoughts are around that, because it is such an important part of the work that we conduct as a council, please? Thank you.
Mrs Thorburn can help you with that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Horrell, for the question. Yes, so in November 2024, we took a paper to Economic and Housing Policy about our current situation with the Disabled Facilities Grants on how many households we've able to help and the type of adaptation, but also the concerns over our budget, because we have more applications, costs of work have increased, but the budget hasn't increased. However, since taking that paper, we have had an announcement of around about another £150,000 for this year. So that's really well received and appreciated. So we reviewed the policy back in March 2023, and we made some tweaks where we didn't have a limit on discretionary, and we've now capped that at 100,000. We've done a lot of analysis and realised that we really need to maybe be supporting our more vulnerable households remain in their own homes. And at the moment, we support all households, regardless of their income and their means. So at the moment, we have a discretionary allowance of £15,000 for everybody. And going forward, we're looking, one of our thought processes is we lower that discretionary. And what we're doing this year is we're sort of running shadow policies against our policy to see what type of impact that some of our thoughts and suggestions might have, because we didn't want to make a decision not knowing the impact on our most vulnerable residents. So at the moment, the team are working really hard, running a couple of our ideas, and the hope is we bring that back to this cabinet November time with a more definitive policy, and hope that that gets adopted. Does that cover everything?
Thank
Councillor Horrell, thank you.
I'll just add to that, there was a good debate at the Economy and Housing Committee, and there were many good points made by that committee, which we will be taking into consideration when we come back with the final paper for this. Thank you. If okay, I'd like to move on to debate on this paper. Is there any debate? Okay, Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. I'm very aware that this paper deals with a huge number of issues in the housing portfolio. I think it's fair to say we have a lot of plates spinning. And I suppose my question with that, and also I know last year we were slightly limited on officer resources at some point. We had a number of vacancies as to our priorities here. If we don't have enough time and available resources, what are the things that are crucial here in this paper, because there are many that are planned through the year. And the other element, Chair, and I'm always very keen on looking at the risk assessment. I'm not sure, and this is a question for officers to review, is that when you cross-reference the risk assessment detailed in section 10 with some of the issues raised in the appendix and the report, I'm not sure we've captured everything that is actually a risk for this authority in this key area. And I think that is a really important point that all of us as councillors and officers need to know. Where are are those risks that potentially could take us off track? And as I say, I was correlating what's in the appendix with what is in the risk assessment. That's not for now, Chair, but I think answering now, but I think it is something that we should pay attention to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horan. I saw many pens writing on my left-hand side there, so that will be taken into account, I'm sure, going forwards. Any further debate? Councillor Lee.
And just really to say thank you to the housing team. Obviously, this is like playing three-dimensional chess with lots of moving parts, and I recognise that having lived in this world in a previous life. But I'm grateful for the focus on the greener aspects as well as the social aspects. And I think the other point to say is that we had a very good conversation with the Citizens Advice team in Wickham, and I really like the close work and liaison that goes on between Citizens Advice and our teams, and I think that's brilliant. So I look forward to the review, taking forward the moving parts and avoiding the checkmates on the review. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate? If not, I will summarise. So again, thank you for the work on this paper. I love your analogy to three-dimensional chess, which it really is what it is. You're quite right in terms of the resources that we have available. I mean, we've got objectives here: more homes for all, greener homes, homes that meet different needs, better managed homes, better neighbourhoods. It cuts across every aspect of our work, but it also, we're trying to influence the wider district outside of our direct remit as well. And it is a difficult task to achieve, and I think the officers do a good job of trying to pull this together within the scope and the challenges they have in terms of the resource. We have an updated action plan as an appendix on the paper, which didn't feature much in the debate and the questions there, but it is there. So I turn to my cabinet colleagues. We're being asked here to note the progress of the objectives against the Housing Strategy 2023-28 delivery plan as outlined in the report. Note the emerging challenges that have arisen since November 2023 and approve the amended delivery action plan for 2023 to 2028. Colleagues, can I ask if we note points 1 and 2 and approve point 3?
Noted and approved.
Thank you. So moving on to item 10, which is the paper on social housing regulation. I have Mrs. Mellish, who would like to make some points on this paper, and I'll come to you in a minute, Lynn. Firstly, just to introduce this paper, the housing, that's the wrong one. Let's go to the right one. At its meeting in February 2024, this committee received a report on social housing regulation and the implementation of the Social Housing Regulation Act from April 2024. The committee agreed that a report should be brought back to this committee later in the year with an assessment of the housing service against the new consumer standards and what would be required to meet them. The purpose of this report is to apprise the committee of the self-assessment that has been undertaken. The Housing Service has developed an action plan to address the requirements of the consumer standards and to drive service improvement. As part of that drive to improve services and achieve the consumer standards, the Housing Service has self-referred to the regulator of social housing to work with them to ensure that the new regulatory standards are achieved as soon as possible. Budgetary provision to achieve the regulatory requirements has been incorporated in the current year and has additionally been built into the 2025-2026 Housing Revenue Account budget, which will be moved for approval during February. The paper was also discussed at the TACT board meeting held on the 27th of January, and the feedback from the TACT board discussion was as follows: that the board discussed the contents of the report and also had input from independent members on the board. This was not an uncommon position for the council's housing service to find itself with. Bearing in mind on that board, we do have an independent member who is an integral part of a large housing team in another authority, and an independent member who is delivering customer service, service director for a public utility company. The board agreed that the housing service should implement the action plan at speed as recommended in the report, which is to improve stock condition data and compliance information evidencing safety data, and secondly, to implement the safety and quality action plan with a focus on fire safety in line with independent review recommendations. So that was the summary from the TAC board. So first of all, can I just turn to the two TAC board members who are sitting at the table, so Councillor Horrell and Lynn Mellish. I mean, Councillor Horrell, is there anything you wanted to add from the TAC board discussion? Have I summarised there as you would expect?
Chair, I do have some further questions which I can raise when we get to that in this report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Mellish, is there anything that you would like to add to my summary from the TAC board discussion? Would you like to?
Sorry.
It's all right, you get used to it.
The only thing for me is really, as a tenant, the reference to stock conditions surveys. I found it very concerning that it's been such a long time since they've been carried out. So can I ask, is there a timescale for getting these back up to date? When will they start, and how long do you expect it to take to get the full data on all the properties?
Can I ask Mrs. Hobbs just to answer that specific question for you? Lynn.
Thank you for the question. So we are engaging with an external partner at the moment to really mobilise that programme. We've got a very high level scope that was only received last week, so there's lots of things to get in place. Their proposed timescales, subject to procurement and going through everything, would be to really mobilise half of our stock within this calendar year. As I say, that isn't a committed deadline as such. That's a high level scope and quote that we've received. So we'll be looking at that imminently to review and look at what needs to be in place to mobilise. There's 2 adverts out currently for graduate surveyors as well. And the intention is to grow and develop our own internal teams to deliver this on a cyclical rolling programme to ensure. So those timescales for the other 50% of the stock won't yet be able to be confirmed, but we'll give that commitment to continue to update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hobbs. Lynn, are there any other points you wanted to make at this point? Is your chance to speak on this one? No? Okay, thank you. So councillors, can I turn to you and ask those questions? So Councillor Power, you were first, followed by Councillor Lee.
My questions also relate to the stock survey. How will tenants be reassured that they should allow access for the surveyor? Do we anticipate 100% access, and how do we handle that if we do not achieve it? And do we expect to find urgent works to be done as a consequence of the internal survey? Thank you.
Mrs. Anderson, thank you.
Thank you for your question. So working with the team and mindful of lots of important messages to our customers, we're working on a comms plan with our the corporate comms team, so that actually all the important messages for our customers around who are we, what do we do, why is our work important, how we want to support our customers in our home, in their homes, to enjoy their homes, is really crucial for us. And also working with Prashanta's team around the value of retrofit. So that comms plan is quite detailed, that we're working towards in terms of encouraging people to give us access and why that's important, and then working across teams where that's not happening, because I think often when we don't hear from our customers, that's when it's important that we do access. So working really hard to get that 100% access, and we will be talking with the surveyors and other colleagues about how do we do that and facilitate that. So more work to do there to encourage our customers to trust us and enable us to cross the threshold. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Largely my questions have been raised. This issue about 100% access and timeliness, because these essential safety issues is really critical, isn't it? But also, as you know, Chair, I come from the school of let's add value without distraction costs wherever we can. So presumably these surveys could also look at some other things if the expertise is there. So, for example, I'm thinking about, where those properties don't have water butts. We want to attenuate stormwater getting into drains, creating drainage and flood issues as one example. There may be others in terms of nature. If we're in an area where there's an opportunity to put a swift box up and the eaves are right, why not clock that at the same time? This is just that wider, joined up thinking, which I think we could perhaps apply. Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's a question on the scope of the survey that we'll be doing. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. So it's very specific to the stock condition survey and decent homes, but that's something that I will take away and talk and discuss with Sarah in more detail and Prashanta as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. It was a very significant move to self-refer to the housing regulator, and we clearly don't know their view at this point unless you have additional information. So the question is, where are our further exposures here if they're not satisfied with our plan, and do we have sufficient money allocated in the budget to accommodate any of those potential demands that they may raise with us, given we've self-referred? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendy.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the council's exposure to the social housing regulator, they've confirmed there's 3 ways in which they'll work with us after the self-referral. Firstly, they could look at the information we provide and be satisfied that there's nothing more to do until they come and inspect us. As you know, they would have been inspecting us anyway over a 4-year period. Secondly, they could bring forward the inspection that's already programmed to sooner, perhaps this year, or because they're looking at the information we provide and thinks that might be the case. Thirdly, they might actually make a regulatory judgment on the information we provided now. So we wait to hear from them in terms of what course of action they want to take in relation to the information we will provide them. There will be clearly a very thorough and ongoing dialogue between us and the social housing regulator to provide them information to come to that considered opinion. In terms of the funding requirements, we've moved around a lot of budget in the current year to make sure that we have sufficient funding to address the issues that we're already aware of in the current year. And we have also built in significant sums of money in the next financial year, which I know you'll be considering as part of the HRA budget setting for 25-26.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell, do you have your supplementary as usual?
Chair, in terms of some of the fundamentals to address the gap that we see, we're taking quite a while to do some of it. So Sarah just indicated that we hope to have the first half of our stock condition survey done this year. But actually, if you're in a council home, you might want to see us do that more quickly. Is that possible, or can we speed this up, that important piece of information, to understand the state of our properties so that then we can make the appropriate remedial actions?
Mr. Hendy.
Thank you, Chair. I think perhaps we should reassure our customers on the position of stock condition information. We do have condition on the housing stock because we obviously enter people's homes on a regular basis and we carry out work to people's homes on a regular basis. What we haven't got is a thorough independent stock condition survey. So we are committed to do that. To a certain extent, it's an issue of market capacity in terms of how much we can actually do as quickly as possible. I think probably the overriding reassurance we can provide our customers is around the compliance work. So gas safety, electrical safety, those big 6 items. We have relatively good information on that, although what has been identified and been documented in the report is that what we don't have at the moment is independent verification of that, and that's a step we have to go forward now. But we can give our customers reassurance we do have information, we just don't have that independent information, and we don't have that for quite some time. That's not saying that we haven't been going into people's homes and collecting information on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Becker.
Sorry, Councillor Lee, I've just been waving away here. So, Mr. Hendy, that did answer part of my
question which did follow on from Councillor Horrells. At 11.3, we talk about the verification of third-party work, and the sentence as it's written says there is not The self-assessment identified that although we have carried out compliance work, there is not sufficient oversight in place, and we are not verifying third-party work, which is now best practice. So I was just looking for confirmation that in fact we are now verifying third-party work, or will be verifying third-party work. And also just to question how that came to be that we didn't feel it necessary to verify third-party work. That feels like a bit of an oversight.
If I may, Chair. Firstly, just to give the example of gas safety work, you're probably aware that we have good performance in relation to gas safety compliance. And at the moment, we have artificial intelligence, which reviews the gas safety certificates. So we have a form of it, of third-party verification of that. But in terms of actually employing a separate organisation to look over our shoulders, that's something that has come forward as best practice by the regulator and by other registered providers since April this year. So arguably you could say that it should be done before, although we had an element of verification, albeit through AI in place. Now we need to move towards that best practice that's been indicated by the regulator.
Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This may be a bit of an esoteric question. Can you provide a definition? What do you mean by stock? Is it just the building that we live in? Is it the services that go to the property boundary? And the reason I'm asking this question is, and maybe this is a question for assets, there is a water main which is broken in the Park, Droxford, and it's on our property. So are there some legal issues there which I'm missing? For clarification.
Thank you, Mrs. Hobbs.
Thank you for the question. So that in terms of what the regulator requires of us as a landlord now is that we know what our stock condition is at an individual dwelling. So that is each home, whether that be a masonette, a flat, a bungalow, whatever stock we own. And there's actually a specific matrix that has to be assessed as part of that stock condition. So whilst there will be a full kind of complement of assessing things like components, like the condition of kitchens and things, which we already do anyway as part of our planned and cyclical work. There's a hazard health and safety rating score. It's called HHSRS. There's 29 elements, things like damp and mould, ventilation. There's lots of things that come into that, and that's across sector. So our revised stock condition programme will be looking to update and ensure we have all of those elements. We already capture those elements as part of the other work we do, but not in a specific programme looking at stock condition. So the requirements is to, at an individual dwelling, what is the condition, you know, like your car goes for an MOT at snapshot in time. And then there's certain requirements depending on what comes out of that as to what we do in given timeframes, and we'll be able to report back on that as we progress the programme.
I'm not quite sure answer my question. It's about the boundaries in terms of the property. There are services on site which may not be the responsibilities of the utility companies. So I'm just not clear. Perhaps you can clarify for me. Thank you.
If I can take that one. So Councillor Lee, I am familiar with the estate that you're talking about and the large boundary around the estate and the grounds that are there. And you're talking about a water supply that comes across our ground that services properties in that estate, I believe. Is that correct? I mean, it's probably best to have that specific discussion outside of this meeting. But I think we should just make a note that we have properties that have boundaries on the properties, but the properties are sitting on land on which we have boundaries. I'm not sure whether what we're doing covers the land that's outside the boundaries of the dwellings that we operate and own. So I think that is the question, and we'll take that away if that's okay. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, The regulator KPIs are obviously going to be crucial to us. Are they now going to be incorporated in the council plan, just for clarity for everyone, as the new set of KPIs that we'll be looking at around housing? But also Appendix A, which you're being asked to approve today. I look at that and I see that at a very high level. Is there a detailed version of that plan that we have available to us so that we can better understand the actions and the potential outcomes? Thank you.
Mr. Hendy can take both those points.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we will be recommending new housing key performance indicators to be included in the corporate monitoring system. Obviously, it's up to the council whether they decide they want to adopt that or not. So I can't comment on that now, but we will be putting forward some recommendations around on that. And on the second question, yes, we have a very detailed action plan that backs up the action plan that we've got here, which breaks down all those high level actions, individual actions by officers with time, which are time bound and specific as well.
Thank you. Any further questions before we move on to debate? I see no further questions, so debate. Any debate on this paper? Councillor Cutler.
I mean, I'd just like to commend the housing team for approaching the new housing regulations in this approach, because it would be been so easy to have waited until you're inspected, and it's always a risk to sort of jump in and self-assess and find problems before they arise. But in this case, I think it's really important that we've been proactive with it, although it's perhaps a difficult message to sell, that what has come out of it does require improvement, I suppose, and that's quite a difficult thing to choose to do when we could have waited to see how it panned out. And I do think it's really positive, probably with the regulator as well. That would give us a sort of gold star in that approach, and that they're working with them rather than having it imposed. I think is always a better approach. Having spent many years looking at farm assurance schemes where you have to voluntarily take part in, and it's not easy to have people come in and independently tell you that things don't quite match the level of regulation that now exists. I think it's been a very good approach, and I welcome the action plan that's come out of it.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, I just want to say, obviously, prevention is better than cure, and the cost dimensions of just enough, just in time. So presumably this will be feeding some sort of clever, smart approach based on the condition to how and when we apply action and spend. So I think it's obviously going to be very positive, albeit it's going to be painful to get it done.
Thank you. Any final debate? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. The regime imposed upon us by the regulator for social housing is obviously an important new addition to already a busy workload, and it is clear that we are on a journey to understand how we can address all of those requirements. The one thing I would hope, and we haven't touched on it particularly today, is that we can ensure that we continue to engage well with the tenants. The consumer groups that were set up initially, I think, perhaps were not quite as we all expected, but I appreciate we're in early days, and that we all work together to ensure that we have the best articulation of the tenant voice in whatever form, because that is a fundamental element of what the regulator is asking of us and has historically been a strength for this council, and that we should try and ensure that we maintain that very excellent level of historic dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Any final debate? I'll therefore summarise. In answer to your comment there, Councillor Hall, you know me, and I think communication with the tenants, reassurance that we're doing the right things, the fact that we're an easy organisation to deal with. There's a lot of work to be done, but communication is fundamental, and I talk to the office constantly about ensuring that we are communicating through many different channels, whether that's face-to-face information that we may email out, surveys. Any way of communication is great communication as far as I'm concerned. In this specific area, it's vital that we communicate clearly, and I think the message has been well received over there from me. Thank you. So turn to my cabinet colleagues. Cabinet, we are being asked to note the self-assessment has been undertaken against the consumer standards and to agree the action plan at Appendix A. So I'm happy to note and agree in that order those two recommendations.
Very happy to.
Thank you. Trying to watch some cricket here, come on. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 11, tenant satisfaction measures. So we undertake a tenant satisfaction survey on a regular basis. So the council has carried out tenant surveys for over 20 years under a mix of statutory and discretionary regimes. This report presents the results from the second survey conducted under the new regulatory tenant satisfaction measures, or TSMs, format. This format has been introduced by the regulator of social housing to standardise the questions asked and make it possible to compare the performance of housing providers on issues that matter to tenants. There are 12 TSMs which housing providers are required by the regulator to collect through an annual tenant satisfaction survey. This report also provides the results for the previous year's TSMs as a comparison. There was a 45% response rate to the survey carried out between September and November 2024. The housing service results are at or above Housemarque median benchmark for 9 of the 12 measures. And importantly, there's been a 7% increase in satisfaction scores dealing with antisocial behaviour, which was a focus area from the previous year's satisfaction survey measures. This report was also discussed at the TACT board on the 27th of January, and the feedback from the TACT board discussion was as follows. The overall view of the TACT board was positive in terms of the majority of results being at or above median, but the board had the following recommendations. Firstly, to consider analysing feedback in the context of seasonal trends, in other words, turning data into meaningful information to act upon. Secondly, to review the TSMs in respect of communal cleaning dissatisfaction rates in general needs blocks. Thirdly, to celebrate success, focus on good news via all communication channels available, which my team will do. Fourthly, create an action plan for areas in the district with low satisfaction indicators. So as you drill into the detail of the report, it is quite granular. An example of that may be Stanmore, where we have specific low satisfaction indicators for certain measures. And fifthly, to introduce the housing team to the residents via the residents newsletter and other channels, I might add, who we are and what we do. So again, may I ask just the two members of the TACT board who are sitting at the table if there's any further comments they had to add from the TACT board discussion. Lynn, nothing else? Councillor Hurrell?
Chair, I hope the sort of agreed to-do list that you've just articulated is helpful, because I think we we paid some attention to where there were opportunities, and hopefully that will be taken on board by the officer team and enacted, because I think it came from the whole cross section of the board and hopefully captured some of those important issues. Thank you.
Yeah, and in answer to that, the minutes and recommended actions from that board meeting on the 27th of January are with me for me to approve it, and they will be published to the board members and available more broadly. And I would intend that they are brought back to the board for progress as well as we see them. So I take on board the fact that these are actions that we'd like to see addressed and something done about. So I would expect updates on these back to the board who've asked those questions. And that is the purpose of the board, which is to hold the service to account. So these are recommendations of the board who are holding to account. Therefore, we will be back. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have no other public speakers for this. Councillor Lee is at the table, so we is able to ask his questions. So I'll open the floor to councillors for questions. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I recall that missed appointments were a problem in previous tenant satisfaction surveys, and we introduced a compensation payment, I think, about 2 years ago. Could I question whether the level of missed appointments has gone down and whether we think the compensation payment charged to contractors was a factor in that? Thank you.
Can I ask one of the team if they can answer that? Mrs. Knight.
Thank you. I don't have the stats as to whether or not they've gone down. The compensation policy, though, was introduced in order to reimburse tenants. So if they had taken time off work and they missed, and we agreed a level that we would reimburse for that. We will, in our new redesign repairs and maintenance contract, we will be looking at those kind of penalties for contractors as well, to ensure that we can contract manage that and make sure that they also have the consequences of missed appointments. But I can come back with other stat about repairs. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the respondent profile and the breakdown by wards. I was looking particularly at one of my wards, Swanmore, Newtown, and the response rate, which obviously looks very low. Is there some sort of reason, is some symptom as to why these figures are so low for those wards that are low? Is there something that we council should be aware of, and is there something we can do to help?
Mrs. Hobbs.
Thank you for your question. I guess the short answer is yes. This is what we do now from the results we've got, and absolutely councillors and tenants are, part of that solution. The way we sort of ran the survey, it was conducted over a 6-week period, and there were lots of text reminders, postal reminders and email, depending on preferred methods of communication, and we also used our data to look at that. It's just worth noting, I don't know if it was in the report, so apologies if not, that it was a third of our general needs population that was surveyed, so we didn't go out to all of our general needs. We did go to our sheltered and our temporary accommodation, and that was the methodology used in the previous year. We will be looking at that and drilling into, how many have we surveyed. I think data is information, and it's how we look at that now collectively with yourselves who know your parishes and wards very well. So work to do before the next one. Thank you.
Yeah, could I just ask a follow-up on that very point? So
absolutely.
Given that we've all got wards of, except 2, of sort of similar size, as it were, in terms of residents, did we weight the survey in any way with the company, or were all wards, except the 2 that have different populations, the same?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the survey was weighted to ensure a representative sample. I'd have to go away and look at the specific question around wards, but I can bring that information back to you, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Becker.
Sorry, it's finding the right page. Sorry, the recommendations note that there were 4 indicators below the median benchmark, but I can only see 3. So I just wanted to check which one we're counting as the fourth, and if I could suggest space for another, if there isn't in fact a fourth, that we look at the sheltered respondents and the feeling that their home is safe, because that decrease is significant. And then I had a second question as well.
Do you want to ask it now?
Sure.
Line them up.
No, so it was about the complaints score, and I wondered if it may be something to do with the gap between what a resident counts as a complaint and what the council actively records as a complaint. And so if we're looking at fixing our complaint structure and response, that's not actually addressing what the resident is complaining or telling us about their property. If, you know, they say, oh, my door's broken, in their mind they count that as a complaint, but what we count as a complaint is something quite different. And I wonder if that gap is where maybe we're falling down a little.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor. I'll just have to do a quick scan of the four. The ones I had recorded as dropping were, so although our antisocial behaviour score went up, it's still below the median, so that is still below. Our complaints is on par now, so we wouldn't count that. Satisfaction around cleaning and the makes a positive contribution is also below. So maybe I've miscounted communal areas, positive contribution, antisocial behaviour. Yes, I think we said 9 out of 12 were median, so I think I've counted complaints, so apologies.
I think the difference maybe if you look at the table on page 86, there are 4 red arrows, but the red arrow indicates a statistically significant decline, not a decline that's below the average.
Yeah, that was, we'll get that changed. Thank you for noticing that. And on the complaints, it's really interesting. We're doing more analysis on our complaints, and absolutely that was part of the analysis, that the actual tenant perception answers given, they could exactly take that as a service failure, not responding and not communicating effectively, all of the things we see in our complaints data. So we talked about this quite a lot at our TACT board meeting last week, and the tenant satisfaction measures are really important data because they're from our tenant voice. We want to incorporate that, as is our complaints data through our formal complaints. So we will be doing some work to triangulate, but there is a likelihood that some tenants who answered that question perhaps had a service failure, and we're looking at that more widely as part of our improvement plan with officers as well.
Sorry, and the last point was about the sheltered housing and the feeling that the house might not be as safe as it could be.
Absolutely. I think we definitely have some work to do. Again, they're perception-based questions, so we need to understand. We have a dedicated shelter team who operate across all of our schemes and out in our parishes, so it'll be working with all of those colleagues and officers, as well as local councillors and our tenant board and other groups, to look at what does that mean, and is it a particular scheme or is it a wider spread feeling that homes aren't safe, and what the reasons are for that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at 9. Further comments 9. It's talking about in terms of property issues. The most mentioned is improvement maintenance, and then it's heating and energy efficiency. Is there a correlation between the heating and energy efficiency responses? I don't know if you've done the analysis, and the age of the property and the actual installation.
We haven't yet done further analysis on this, but we absolutely need to look at what's on our retrofit programme, and as you say, drill into that data. So it's kind of being incorporated in the first level, and we have some work to do across the year to understand that as part of our service improvement.
I'll add to that. Whilst the top level indicators, the 12 tenant satisfaction measures, are an indication of what's going on, the general direction of travel, there is a huge amount of data at granular level sitting within that report that is valuable to analyse in many different dimensions. And I just don't think we've had the time to analyse it in that detail this time, but you're quite right. We need to do that in meaningful ways. I'm sure the officers will be doing that. Any Final questions on this report. Councillor Clear.
May I just come back to complaints? And I don't like coming back to complaints because I think you all do a brilliant job. But we still get in our ward, and we have quite an ageing population. They do have great difficulty in letting you know, making a formal complaint. And I know you've got here, they will not have used the formal complaint system, but I'll tell you who they do use. They use us as ward councillors. The younger people, obviously tenants don't seem to have a problem if they make a complaint. But I just wondered if there was some easier way, because the older population do have problems. And sometimes when I put a complaint through on their behalf, I have a little perhaps I'm in the older population now, but I just wondered, because that's their main complaint, can't be bothered, can't get through.
And the irony isn't lost on me on that, and why people complain and why they come to us. Actually, another change in the last year has been a mandatory requirement for us to self-assess on our complaints handling. So the Housing Ombudsman has brought that in. So we submitted our initial one in June. We had a good debate and discussion at our TACT board about complaints, and we're going to be engaging with one of our independent members there who, as mentioned at the start, is in a private company and in customer experience. So we're going to set up a bit of a focus group around working with our tenants and our officers and TACT board to look at our complaints process. We have done quite a bit to look at the complaints handling code, and we're currently delivering training to officers, making that mandatory, because it's about raising the profile of how you make a complaint, barriers to complaints. We did a bit of a session in the previous consumer standard group on maybe what the barriers might be. So I think it's continuous improvement that is never going to stop. So yeah, any suggestions you have as well, please feel free to get in contact. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. We clearly had a score that was less than satisfactory around ASB last year, but we've seen a significant improvement in that in this survey, which is great news. Question, in our efforts to turn around some of the other scores, we have some that are significant, but there is a overall general trend downward, even though we historically have been above the benchmark here as an authority. So we've set ourselves high standards. But is there anything in how we took that knowledge and turned it into a better outcome that we can use for the improvements that we're looking for in some of the other score deviations that we've had this time? Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. So just reflecting on that comment, Councillor Horrell, and thank you. The team responsible for ASB have done significant work with the Resolve organisation to review their service delivery. And I think I'm being a critical friend to my colleagues as well in terms of how we can improve our service delivery and make our housing officers much more well known to our customers, looking at the size of the patches that we run as well, and how do we operate our services across housing really, and how we can make that easier to do business with really. So a number of things that we're looking to do in terms of officer engagement and engagement with customers to make sure that our service is easier to access, it's easier for people to contact us, mindful of the complaints feedback as well. So there's lots of work underway around how we can improve our service offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions, or can we move on to debate? Move on to debate. Any debate? Councillor Horrell, then Councillor Clear.
Chair, thank you. One thing I've heard through this morning's business is using your councillor network, 45 of us, to help you. We live in the communities, as I think Councillor Clear said, we're often the ones that people come to. We know the communities. We want to support you to do an outstanding job. And I think involving us, certainly where many of us have significant properties from ourselves, council properties, we could be a resource for you in times when things are difficult and resources are tight. So I think all of us probably who are sat here would be really happy to be engaged in a more proactive way to support all of you, so that we have next year a survey where the arrows are all going upwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more debate? Councillor Lee.
Just picking up on that, actually, I wonder whether there's a way to get transparency of reporting. Obviously, I pick up stuff on the doorstep, and I don't want to bother you guys with an email. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just look at the database, maybe some metadata level or something, so you don't want to give away confidentialities, but I don't then have to say it, because I can see it's been said for that location, that street, that postcode. There's got to be a smarter way of doing this, I feel. A bit like my county council can look at where potholes are, whereas I can't. Thank you.
Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair, but I think Councillor Horrell has stolen my thunder, because I was about to say we absolutely support you and thank you for the good job you do, but help us as well, the councillor network, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who get phone calls, and we're quite happy to help people. Obviously, that's part of our job, but please remember us. But just to say thank you so much, because you do a brilliant job.
Okay, any further debate, or can I sum up? All right, so the tenant survey, I mean, from my perspective, the numbers have gone down slightly. I'm pleased that we've beaten or come level to the benchmark in so many of the TSMs. I do believe we're still in the top quartile across the UK, which is a great place to be, but we can't be complacent about that. There's a lot of work to be done. There are a number of scores that have gone down. We need to get absolutely on top of that. And you know, as a service, we are all, as a team, very clear that we provide a service to our tenants. We don't build things, new homes now and again, but we provide a service. That service needs to be easy to do business with, and the people using that service should understand who we are, what we do, how they use it, and they should be happy with the service we give. This is a journey for us. We know we need to do it, and we know the areas of our business that we need to sharpen up to make that happen. I think the work that we've got behind the scenes in terms of providing a customer-centric, customer-facing service, easy to do business with, will impact across a range of the scores that we're seeing on the scorecard. And then beyond that, we need to take some of the detail of this report to look at the specifics. So with that, I turn to my Cabinet colleagues once more, and we're being asked to note the survey results and to note the work that is underway or proposed to address the 3 indicators that are below the median benchmark. So Cabinet, are we able to note those recommendations? Thank you very much. And we move on apace and with bated breath to the final item on our agenda, which is the Venta Living business plan for 2025-26. Bear with me while I just get my notes in place. So we have the Venta Living business plan in front of us today at Cabinet Committee Housing. This will take a route through Cabinet and ultimately to full council for approval. I would like, if the gentlemen are happy, I would like to invite one or more of the directors of Venta Living to the table to present their business case to us, to talk us through it. And Councillor Pett, if you are willing to do so, to answer any questions that the committee may have on that business plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies.
Ask whether we're going to.
I'm going to ask if you can just introduce this briefly, and or I don't know how long you want, but if you can introduce it briefly, then I'll ask Mr. Tate to come up and to ask his questions after a short introduction, if that's okay, or would you prefer I do it the other way?
I was just going to ask, Chair, whether you want to go into private session for the detail of the business case.
I don't want to talk about anything that's in the exempt papers at this point, because I'd need to go into private session.
So I'm more than happy to present an overview of the activity of the past.
You can present an overview, and then we'll ask Mr. Tate to join us. And once we've answered Mr. Tate's questions, then I'll ask if anybody wants to discuss the exempt papers, in which case we need to go into an exempt session at that point. That's okay. So we can steer clear of anything in Appendix A and B at this point. And once you've given an overview, then I'll call Mr. Tate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, members will recall that full council agreed to the setting up of Venter Living Limited as a tackle company just over 18 months ago. I am one of the 4 non-executive directors. Behind me are Dawn Adey, who is the officer member of the board, and Tim Sharp, who's our non-executive chairman. And then there's me and James Batho as the 2 elected members who sit on the board as well. Our meetings are also overseen, as it were, by Simon Hendy, who is the council advisor to the board. Since being set up, we had originally anticipated that Foxglove House, the 41 apartments there, would become available around about the turn of the year 23-24. Of course, none of us around this table are unfamiliar with project overruns, least of all me with an MOD background. And therefore, it really should be no surprise to any of us that the first tenancy wasn't actually taken up until the middle of June last year. So the business case that was originally put to full council was based on the premise of starting to fill about 6 months before we actually did. As a consequence of that, it's now the point where we've reached all but 5 of the apartments being let. It's been a steady increase since June of last year, and we now only have 1 that is left to go to contract, as it were, and 4 that are awaiting the final preparations for signing. So I think we're cautiously optimistic that we're pretty much on course against the original timescale from the point at which Foxglove House became available to the point where we would fill all 41 properties. And indeed, you may recall that the original business plan included an element of void that would likely be in place throughout. So, as I say, we seem to be pretty much on course. The new business plan that we're presenting to you today takes account of that fact that in effect we have shifted all the projected figures about 6 months to the right, and that's simply because of that cost overrun. And I think that's probably where I'll leave it for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Pett. So at that point, I'll hold questions. Mr. Tate, would you like to join us? I thought it would be useful just to get that overview of the current position before you asked your questions, so you knew where we were. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet again. I've always wondered what the purpose of setting up a separate company, Venter Living Limited, was all about. And clearly, without being able to see the confidential paper, I've not got much more understanding of it. I've already said this, but having been a director or an observer of the Winchester Housing Trust for the last 25 years, which you can go onto Companies House, you can see the composition of the board when it was first set up. It would have been perfectly possible for the council to have used Winchester Housing Trust to have managed the Winnall flats, and Winchester Housing Trust was approached in that role, and for reasons I don't understand, that it didn't go that way. And I don't want to be overly critical of the delivery of new homes through the city council model. It's just not an effective, cost-effective model. And having some slight understanding of housing delivery and company structures and this area, I don't see really any purpose for Venta Living. It could be done in a different way. You're trying to reinvent the wheel. The council's taken on the funding for Ukrainians and Afghan residents. Okay, Basingstoke don't have their own housing stock. They got rid of that. But Basingstoke came to Winchester Housing Trust, as the chair knows, and the Housing Trust have taken on 5 units. So I'm afraid I don't understand really the purpose of Venta Living. And what the paper, that the information available to me as a member of the public tells me pretty much nothing whatsoever. So as someone who has a slight interest in providing more housing, both affordable and inclusive housing in the district, it's the last paper you're going to consider today, and that feels about the priority for Venta Living. So I may remain perplexed as to why it's there, and it just seems that you've got 3 councillors and 1 non-councillor, not quite the same as Winchester Housing Trust when it was set up, but not dissimilar, reinventing the wheel. But thank you for the chance to vent.
Thank you for your puns. And can I firstly ask Mr. Hendy if he would like to respond to some of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just responding to the points made by Mr. Tate before my time, by my understanding was that there was a commitment to the people living on the Winnall estate that the new development would include tenure diversification and thus the market rented product provided in Foxclove House. Secondly, in terms of is it the most viable way of approaching this? Well, all I can say it is, and that was tested out when the council made the decision to set up Venta over a year ago now. I can't go into any more detail of that because it would mean moving into Appendix A for the detailed figures. But to give you some assurance, it was the most effective way of providing market rented housing on that site.
Thank you. Councillor Pett, you looks as though you wanted to add to that as well.
Only just to say that going back to the original paper that went to full council, of course, the purpose of setting up Venta was to go a small way to addressing the need for smaller private sector rented housing in Winchester, to add to that choice amongst the market offering in the city. So it's not there to offer affordable housing per se. It is simply to address the smaller market sector rented housing.
Thank you. As a mistake, I hope that goes some way to answering your question. Thank you. At this point, I need to ask the committee if you want to discuss any items and ask any questions on the appendix and the exempt papers. So I'm looking as and I'm seeing that that's probably the case. So, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, and I've got a very quick question for an open session if you wish.
So at this point, for the questions and the subsequent debate, I believe we need to go into exempt session. So, okay, all right, I can hand questions on the open paper, so the main paper. Okay, so Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I suppose the obvious question is why the slow uptake rate of occupancy, and can you just give me a quick overview of what the type of tenancy agreements are for the occupants?
Yeah, was it a slow uptake? I mean, in terms of the situation at this point last year, when there was some uncertainty over when the property was going to be finished, there was sort of a little bit of hesitancy in how strongly we should market the properties in the first half of 2024. I think when we got to the point where they were handed over, there's been quite a strong uptake, given the need to take references and all the standard legal niceties of tenancies. So I think we are reasonably satisfied with the rate at which the properties have been filled. There have also been, of course, we're still in the snagging period for the property as a whole. So there have been quite a few issues that the build contractor is having to address on the properties, which I suppose has to a degree slowed the uptake a little, but by and large, I think we're pretty satisfied with the rate at which they've been taken up, and they are standard short hold tenancies.
Any further questions on the open paper? Councillor Horrell, then Councillor Power.
Chair, thank you. 11.7, I note that you have no proposals to expand further, although we know from a housing point of view there's a huge gap in our district. So is it the slower start than anticipated that is driving that, or what is behind the fact that you don't have any aspirations to add further projects? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think it would be wrong to say we don't have aspirations. I think it would be better to say that we're trying to walk before we can run and get the whole of Foxglove House rented out before we start looking at other opportunities. And of course, at the end of the day, those opportunities must come from the council as well. They have to be put within our formal purview, as it were. So at the moment, we're focusing on getting Foxglove House fully occupied. When we've reached that point, then certainly we as a board are open to any other proposals coming forward, and obviously they would need to be looked at quite critically to see whether they are in the bounds of the TECL as it's been set up.
And Mr. Hendy can answer on from a shareholder perspective.
Thank you, Chair. I think from a shareholder perspective, we would be reluctant to recommend to the council a similar model that exists with Venture at the moment. Members might remember when this model was set up, there are risks around the council's VAT position from this model, and entering into an agreement with Venture on a similar model would increase that risk around VAT. Now, that doesn't mean there could be other options to work with the company to bring forward market rented housing, but it probably wouldn't be on the model that exists at the moment with Venture.
Thank you. And Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I note that 5 units were handed over late and there have been snagging issues. Were there any compensatory payments from the developers arising from those?
I think it's true to say that those compensatory payments, if they're made, were between the developer and the developer's customer, which is of course the council. So Mr. Hendy is probably better placed to answer that one for you.
Okay, we don't have that information, Councillor Power, so we'll come back to you on that. Thank you. And Councillor Becker.
Thank you. We almost touched on it, didn't quite get there. So the report, I understand, was written in late November, and it says that there were approximately 10 flats not yet let. I wonder if there was an update.
Yes, we get regular updates as a board, and last week's update, which bear with me a moment, is the one that states we have 5 units unoccupied, 4 that are awaiting references and so on, and 1 that we're still awaiting an offer on.
It's a good move in a few months.
Sorry,
it's a move forward.
Yeah,
a good move forward
that's
in the last few months since the report was.
It's been a fairly steady drumbeat, to be honest, which is why we're reasonably optimistic that all will come good. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, any Councillor Horrell.
Chair, could I just ask Councillor Pett how you gauge tenant satisfaction? It says that you get regular updates, so just asking how you receive those. Thank you.
As a board, we get regular updates from the council staff against those properties that have been let, those that are waiting references, and so on and so forth. In terms of tenant satisfaction, we're in this rather strange period of being in the snagging period with the contractor. So there's a sort of, there have been several examples where the council officers have had to take forward complaints with their contractor, and that's the way things have gone up to now, because we're still in that snagging period. Once we're through that, then yes, we have separate policies for dealing with tenant satisfaction and gauging it as we move forward. But at the moment, we're still in that sort of no man's land, that it's not the company that's actually responsible for the state of them. It is still the council and its contractor who delivered them in the first place.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the main paper? Okay, so we will need to move into exempt. So I think I have to propose that we move to exempt. Seconded. So we move to exempt session so we can Thank you. Remembering that we are in open session now, so we need to avoid any specifics on the exam papers. So debate. Do I have any debate on this paper? Okay, so I see no debate. So in summary, just to summarise, I think this is an important piece of work on behalf of the council to provide additional private rented accommodation, which and one bed flats are seriously in demand across this city, and you know, we need a lot more of them. The private rental market in Winchester is contracting. There's no doubt about that, and the rents on these properties, or the market rents, are reasonably priced market rent one bed properties, and I think they're a tremendous asset to the city. So I'm pleased to see that we're on the verge of filling 40 of the 41 once the references have been taken and contracts agreed, and look forward to the full occupancy as soon as it can. So turning to my cabinet colleagues again, the recommendations are to review the updated financial business plan at Appendix A and B in the exempt part of the agenda and recommend its approval to Cabinet. So Cabinet colleagues, are you able to approve the Appendix A and B? Thank you very much. I believe that takes us to the end of business. So thank you for your patience. Apologies that this has taken nearly 3 hours to run through, and thank you again.